The Guardsman. Written by Dr.K-MoonShard. Chapter 2. Alien Gossip. Part 1.
Our thoughts light the darkness that others may cross space. We are one with the Emperor. Our souls are joined in his will. Praise the Emperor who sacrifices life as ours is death. Hail his name of the Master of Humanity.
The Credo of the Astronomicon. The Karskin Cadian, with his eyes closed and body limp, heard the shrieks of warp abominations before him. All was dark, and he was submerged in what felt like an ocean. Just moments before, all the warp surrounded him, engulfing his body in warp fire, and a wave of wrongness rippled across his very being. Distantly throughout the realm of humans and demons, the screams of fear from men and women and children can be heard, making the Cadian Karskin's body freeze up in a cold sweat, followed by the cries of fearful, agonizing horror. The sky roared as if in anger, with the great storms raging for what felt like days on end. Change was in the air. The laughter of thirsting gods grew more audible, and the Cadian Karskin's mind was full of terrible dreams, thoughts, memories, and omens. The end times grew nearer. A dark, horroring future was coming, with a feeling of something not right in the air. Deep down, a sense of wrongness permeated his heart. The warp slithered its tendrils onto millions of worlds. A connection was made from one reality to another as they began to merge together as one. The sounds of humans suffered from demonic possessions, their only saving grace being the utter weakness of the host, unable to handle the strain of such a horrific monstrosity, literally tearing its soul apart, before the demon would finally be sent back to the warp, when its mortal vessel came apart by the seams. The Cadian Karskin heard many horror stories and tales of the warp, the immaterial realm, from other veterans or officers. Whether they were true or not, he didn't know. Meanwhile, the Cadian Karskin felt his thoughts begin to desire the experiment of increasing depravity and degenerate heretical practices in search of fulfillment. Forward things were done, and slowly, steadily corrupted with the excess of gluttony, they became more twisted, more sadistic, and more callous. The Cadian Karskin felt something was wrong, but couldn't pinpoint exactly what felt wrong, twisted, and evil. The presence of amalgamation of heretical thoughts began to increase as well, as if they were words spoken by madmen, doomsday prophets who harked at the ignorant masses who abandoned the worship of the weak god emperor and followed the true four. The warp pranced among his mind and soul. Corn would make you strong and powerful, to never feel helpless again. Nurgle would nurture you, to make you indomitable to pain and misery. Zeech would give you hope, to give you a chance for change. And Slanesh would give you your wildest pleasures of the world you would never experience, unbridled excess and gluttony. The slow calming whispers filling the mind of the Cadian Karskin, the downtrodden, the abused, the abandoned thoughts echoed his mind.
Why should he worship an uncaring being like the God Emperor of Man, who is nothing more than a corpse at best, and a useless, selfish being at worst? Why should he give him his love, his worship, his adoration?
The Cadian Karskin let out a scream, only to be silent as he gripped his ears with both hands. The whispers, the feelings, the thoughts in his mind driving him to feel enraged hatred. They speak lies. They are nothing but temptations and heresy only a traitor would dare believe. His memories of his trainings, the countless battles, and all the prayers he made having faith that the Emperor was listening to his prayers, was it for nothing? He had a mixture of instinctual fear and anger as his body soon held its guard up, bracing for anything. Gripping his ears tightly, but nothing came or happened. The whispering echoes ceased, leaving only the Cadian to feel his nerves come and anxiety to dread his body with worry. Even more worrying was how silent the gods have been, followed with everything around his body. There was change in the air. They were about to be brought into a new age. The age of fire and brimstone, of death and misery. Coming sooner. Perhaps they were annihilated. Maybe they simply disappeared. As he let go of his ears and felt his body lower its guard, returning to a limp. The Cadian Karskin felt like he was in the warp for millennium, aimlessly floating around, the cruel cackling of Neverborn surrounding him like a predator stalking its prey. He quickly went to his holster, forming a tight grip on his las pistol, unholstering it, never once letting go, and he was sorely tempted to open fire. But he just knew that would do little more than amuse them. He often felt their hungry grasps, but he stubbornly kept his eyes closed, for if he were to open them, it would without a doubt lead him to insanity and ruin. Eventually, however, he slowly began to feel something pulling him away. Perhaps sensing their prey would escape them, the warp fiends began to snarl as if trying to intimidate whatever it was trying to take him away to no avail. The snarls of the daemons began to die out as the Cadian Karskin was dragged across the immaterium as if sucked in by a powerful vortex. As much as I would love to see all this chaos being played and unfolded, it's really not my forte. Too brutal. So I'll do you a favor in return. You do something for me later. Human of the Broken Gate. Find me at the Palace Gardens. You'll know when you find the statue of a Draconicus. He heard the voice speak in his mind as he got dragged away in the warp. What the hell was a Draconicus? What was pulling him away? So many thoughts, yet he could only hear deafening shrieks of the warp as he was seemingly dragged from one end to another, before he suddenly met with very solid ground. With a painful grunt, the Cadian Karskin backplanted on what felt like a hard rock. Knowing that anything to do with the foul warp was likely to an end to his misery, the Cadian Karskin cautiously opened up one of his eyes, expecting to see that he landed on a blasphemous hellscape with a demon ready to skewer him. Instead, he saw only a green grass as far as the eye could see, and a beautiful clear sky that Cadia even lacked on days of silence, but it reminded him of old paintings and stories told in the libraries of its founding. It was too blue, too beautiful, and not even a hint of warp's purple-hued tendrils or dark smoke clouds. He looked around some more and found a severe lack of trenches, barbed wire, and corpses, to his horror. There was no choking smog, no bloodied mud chuck full of chemical waste, or toxic, or even craters of explosions from dropped warheads or artillery. Just green grass and trees that cast dark shadows of shade as far as the eye can see, but the sounds of the trees' green leaves gently and quietly rustling, and with a melodic whistling chirpit of different tones and patterns around him, playing at random cues. Squinting his eyes to see a feathered creature resting on a tree branch, realizing it was just a bird, a purple one, but a bird with others that whistled in musical chirping. The air was clean. The skies were a bright blue, as the sun shined warmly through the dark shadows from the green treetops. It was horrible. The Cadian Karskin struggled to get up, finding himself painfully sore all over, but his training had forced him to force those feelings away. He sat up shakily, as if he had just awakened from a long, deep rest. He tried to recall what happened, but only remembered pulling the pin of a plasma grenade as demons charged him, and being blinded by a bright flaming blast of light with extreme heat. His vision had mercifully blacked out before getting a glimpse of the horrors of the warp. What is this planet? Where am I? And what the fuck? He was surprised, cutting off his thoughts to see that his body was virtually unharmed. Even his amputated left leg was restored with blood. The makeshift bandages were restored with his uniform and armor, revealing scars over the bare right side of his face, as if burnt now. Just a leather feeling with the same one on his gloved hands, as if it was never an injured at all, just aching horribly. However, his gear still appeared to be battle-worn, with the new scars on his body. But like his training had taught him, he pushed those thoughts and feelings aside and stood up fully. His bones creaked, and he was almost sure that he felt like his body was about to fall back down. Training or no training, he picked himself up, leaned on a boulder. He patted himself down and did a quick checklist in his mind. He was surprised to see some equipment just sitting down. However, he frowned as he noted they were not his trusted Hellgun, but a model, and the battery catch was instead the standard duo cable set. There were only a broken singular cable that was damaged, as if the wires were ripped apart from whatever it was in its power source. He was unfamiliar with it. Lucky him, though, it still had a scope built into it. Hellgun, though not mine and broken, check. Las pistol, check. Power pack, broken, cable pulled out, check. 3 charge packs, check. 2-3 frags, check. 1 of 3 crack grenades, check dishonorably. Trench knife, check. Borrowed trench shovel from a Kriegsman, check. Helmet. He quickly looks around only to spot his helmet, and a few feet from where he stood before. He takes a wobbly step to his helmet, quickly picking up his carapace helmet and seeing the mask with his respirator still attached. But the orange visor cracked, but still whole. He lets off a relieving sigh, putting on his helmet, and the clips strap along with his gas mask. Check. He moves his arms to take off his backpack power generator, unclipping the straps that hold items and personal effects, and performs a checklist of all that he has, reaching in to dig around and pull out the lay on the ground, checking what his inventory holds. Rucksack, toolkit, weather gear mess kit with canteen, piece of rations, sleeping bag with a blanket, lamp pack, kit, extra borrowed respirator cans, comm bead, and Imperial Infantry's primer, all checked and accounted, mostly. The Cadian Karskin piled back everything in his backpack power generator, clipping it shut, stood up and began looking around his surroundings, a little clearer. Standing straight and holstering his last pistol, all around him was the sign of a relatively peaceful forest, or what he thinks is a forest anyhow, seeing the dark shade of its shadow cast blocking out the sun's majority of the light. The Cadian Karskin glanced around before blinking as he saw a half-buried skeleton in the dirt, clad in rotting gear and covered in foliage. Shoveling the dirt away with his hands, the Cadian Karskin callously dug up an old corpse and roughly dragged it out, uncaring when only half of the corpse chose to do so. The legs had been missing from the body, possibly ripped or blasted off. He quickly scanned his surroundings for any signs of danger of what had killed this man. Nothing but the forest still around him. Gazing back down at the corpse, he shamelessly looted the body, but glanced at his shackles around his wrists as a flash of memory shot through his mind, and a sigh of disappointment was let out. He shook his head, clasping both hands, bowing his head slightly, uttering, "My apologies, fallen one," before he continued to rubble through the remains, picking through the pockets to find 2 empty powered las packs and a spare bayonet trench knife. But what caught his eyes was the power sword, though rusted beyond time, was held firm in the skeletal's corpse grip. Mostly expired, but viable ration packs were still found and pocketed. The Cadian Karskin almost tore a piece of parchment in two as he rummaged through the corpse's webbing, seeing a wax seal stamped. Holding it in his hands gently, and moving it closer to see the reveal of the Inquisition. Unraveling it carefully, he narrowed his eyes and looked at the contents. An order from the Inquisition itself. It was a real signed Inquisition mark. Perhaps this corpse was a different guardsman, the elite guardsman, or even an inquisitor. He certainly had equipment, but his uniform being only an off-putting with a skull-shaped broken glass gas mask and a thick heavy trench coat. Though ruined by the ravages of time, he very nearly frowned when he saw the date, however. Certainly a few centuries late. One can never be too sure when it involves the warp. This guardsman had a strange name, as it was only named an only long set of numbers, ended with the name Hans Ludwig, from Krieg? But what was a Kriegsman doing here? And dead? Looking back at the parchment, apparently his job was to scout the planet for the glory of the Imperium. A job that ended with his demise, it seems. But what killed such a guardsman? Perhaps these ponies are the enemy. Kriegsman Hans seems to think they are trustworthy Xenos. However, wondered the Cadian Karskin before standing up. What is this magic of friendship he spoke of? So many questions in his mind, the most essential thing only to fill his thoughts. In many cases, the standard guardsman doctrine for all guardsmen, after a total decimation, was to find the highest ranking officer for new orders, and preferably introduction into a regiment. With the lack of any officers around, the Karskin Cadian felt free to do what he decided. Being far from the war, but a wave of uneasy emotions flooded over him. He was in an unfamiliar environment, possibly filled with hostiles, without any clear orders. He was lost in what to do. Rummaging through Hans' corpse some more, he tried to get clues. From the mixture of reports he found, the expedition was a small one, with this world being a relatively civilized world, discovered out in the edges of the Emperor's divine Astronomicon. It was classified as a feudal world, and despite the heavy presence of xenopopulations and filthy mutant beasts and alien creatures on it, quite a verdant paradise, whatever that meant. With only the Inquisitor and his retinue, they had scouted a significant portion of the planet for the Emperor and Imperium. However, there was no mention of where this Inquisitor had gone, nor where the rest of his retinue was. Just a name. Ponyville. Was that a city or village? Regardless, it was a start, and the Cadian Karskin folded up the reports and stored them in his webbings. He looted the rest of the corpse, finding a worn journal that had seen better days, and a few matches. Shouldering his broken hellgun, if he needed to fire it quickly or pretend to make a threat at least, he stood up and marched forward, but stopped and looked back at the corpse, staring intently. Staring at the rusted old power sword and sighing heavily before turning back to the corpse, picking up the old blade and tightening his grip on it as he held it up high. Though rusted, the imprints of the blade were still visible. The sword looked beautifully crafted. He turns it slowly, it aiming the blade down at the dirt, and stabs the blade above the skeleton, letting go of its handle and clasping his hands together as he remained silent for a moment. He then bowed his head, looking at both the sword and skeleton. Rest, fallen soldier. You served your purpose honorably, but now I, though tainted in sin and criminal acts, but I, a true-born and son of Cadia Prime, shall continue your work. Let the God Emperor and Holy Terror Star shine your path, and welcome you in peace, soldier. For only in death does duty end. He placed both of his hands, crossing his thumbs together in the form of a shape of the Aquila, as a form of salute, before dropping both of his hands to his sides and about face in place. He marched forward with the intent on re-establishing contact with the local administratum. Failing that, anyone loyal to the Imperium. Hans' mission may have ended with his death, but Cadian Karskin would carry it out for him in the meantime. Orders were orders, no matter where they came from. There is a rather alarming lack of deadly fauna and flora trying to maim him. What a strange forest. He was in an unknown environment, possibly chaos-tainted after his exposure to the warp. He must find Imperial territory authorities immediately and establish contact for orders. Standing at attention, begin marching forward in one direction with iron resolve. determined to re-establish connection with military commanders for further orders.
Girls, I'm sure there is an explanation for everything Zakora does,
Twilight said to the other 6 mares huddled together in the dark room with her. She and her 5 friends, along with Applebloom and Spike, sat in the unlit kitchen of Sugar Cube Corner, trying to avoid drawing attention of the strange zebra in town square, much like everyone else in the area.
And if any pony here was actually brave enough to...
Suddenly Applebloom chimed in.
Hey, looks like there's some pony else in town now. What?
They all said in unison as they rushed over to the window where Applebloom was peeking out, Applejack piping up now.
Now, who in tarnation would be brave enough to...
The girls and Spike joined in their drawn breath as they saw a large, tall, giant bipedal figure approaching Zakora. It appeared to be wearing armor and clothing over most of its body. Most of its body was covered by dirty mud and red-smeared scraped metallic olive-green metal, with a khaki light brown shirt under its green armor. Looked to have even seen better days, with some areas having torn holes in it. The sleeves were worn over its forelimbs, ends, and obscured them with blank gloves. Its bottom half was covered by armor, and its khaki pants with lots of weird dark brown tiny saddlebags. One seemed to be carrying something big in it, and a set of somewhat clunky-looking brown muddy boots. No hair could be seen on it. It had a green helmet, or hat, with a flat face, almost looking like a gray metal mask with barely any noticeable features, topped with an orange-colored visor. Over its shoulders, there was some sort of saddlebag of a dark brown color, pack, clunky as if it was unorganized, with a metal box under it which dragged 2 long broken cables, with a strange long metal stick, and another broken cable hanging from it as it held onto the strap of it.
What in the world is that?
Rainbow Dash said, beginning to resume speaking.
Looks like some kind of big metal monkey.
I ain't never seen a monkey, let alone a metal one like that before, Applejack responded as she squinted her eyes trying to get a better look by turning to Fluttershy. What about you, Shy? You ever seen anything like it?
No, but I think Rainbow Dash might be right. It does look like a primate,
she said, softly, as she tilted her head slightly in thought.
Whatever it is, are you seeing its outfit?
Rarity cut in suddenly.
I mean, the color is a nice shade of tan and brown, but the olive-green combination and the dirt with whatever that red smears are is absolutely atrocious. Oh, what if it's one of Zakora's minions?
Pinky said dramatically, waving her hooves over her head as she did so.
I bet it's telling her to finish some sort of dastardly scheme. Doesn't look like it's telling her anything, Pinky,
Twilight said softly as she took a notepad from the countertop and took notes of whatever she was seeing, even including a small rudimentary sketch as the pencil moved across the paper in an arcane blur.
If anything, it looks to be some sort of warrior, but judging by its behavior, it's confused, but prepared for something. It might be lost. Let's just see what it does.
Thank you for listening all the way through. If you enjoyed this, please consider leaving a like and subscribe, and a comment down below. I love responding to your guys' comments. This has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day.